Can you be a good lawyer if you have ADHD? If you've ever wondered this about yourself or a colleague, welcome to the club. In this video, I'll go through what we know from neuroscience about ADHD and what I've observed as a lawyer with undiagnosed ADHD and a career coach to lawyers with ADHD. And stay tuned, because at the end, I'll reveal what can make or break an ADHD lawyer's career. Welcome back. If you're new to this channel, I'm Annie Little. I'm a former lawyer and an ICF certified career coach. Since 2012, I've been helping lawyers find and land jobs that they actually like, both lawyers with ADHD and without. So of course, we need to start with some groundwork about what ADHD is so that we're all operating from the same set of facts. And if you want to go into more detail, you can check out an earlier video. But just very briefly, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It used to be known as ADD as well. It is a genetic neurodevelopmental disorder that is characterized by low levels of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain. That neurotransmitter is responsible for regulating attention, impulsivity, hyperactivity, and emotions. And why this is important for lawyers is because 5%, roughly, of the adult population is thought to have ADHD. This is in contrast to the estimated 12 to 20% of lawyers who have ADHD. And what that translates into is as many as 1 in 5 lawyers having ADHD. Contrary to the name, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD is actually not about a lack of attention, but rather it's about how the ADHD brain has an abundance of attention and a diminished ability to regulate it. So with all that out of the way, I want us to frame ADHD as a unique way of perceiving and interacting with the world, because that's really what's going on. Our brains have an abundance of attention. We are taking in far more stimuli, and we are picking up on a lot more social cues and patterns and things you would never even imagine that we would be picking up on. And this framing is really helpful because there are very real benefits of having ADHD and working in the legal field. This can also explain why there is such a high percentage of people with ADHD who are drawn to the legal field. And here are some of the reasons why we're drawn to it and why we're also good at it. So people with ADHD tend to have a very strong sense of fairness and are justice-minded. So we can be very passionate about something that we feel is an injustice. And kind of tied to that is that people with ADHD are known to have a very intense determination and drive when they are very interested in something, and you can think of them as like a dog with a bone. The double-edged sword of this is that, of course, it can sometimes lead us down a rabbit hole, but ultimately, you better believe we're going to find what we're looking for. Another benefit that we bring to the practice of law is that we are not so risk-averse as the average lawyer. I mean, it's still relative. Like, lawyers with ADHD are not going to be like super high on the impulsivity spectrum, but this is something that can be really helpful in terms of presenting alternative arguments for things, and also when it comes to the business side of the legal profession, whether that's running a law firm or a legal department or supporting businesses as clients or working in-house and supporting that organization as a singular client. People with ADHD also tend to be more optimistic, which is a nice counterweight to the cynicism that everyone who works in the legal field has. Like, no judgment, it's just the way it is. But we tend to be quicker to see the bright side or the opportunities than the average lawyer. And we're more creative, we're more imaginative. We see things in a different way, and that includes different patterns and connecting dots in ways that sometimes neurotypical lawyers may not have thought of or just haven't thought of yet. We can often get there quicker. Probably one of the most storied advantages of someone with ADHD is our ability to hyperfocus. When certain conditions are met, the ADHD brain is able to zero in and focus very intensely on an interesting project or activity for hours at a time, and we can't be torn away from it. We don't get distracted, we forget to eat, we forget to go to the bathroom. It's like this complete inverse of what you would expect based on our common understanding of ADHD, that we can't pay attention for long periods of time. But when hyperfocus is engaged, this can be really beneficial. For lawyers, this means we can crank out like a brief or an agreement or a contract or some other project in a very condensed timeline, which is great from an efficiency standpoint, but like sucks if you're on a billable model. After we've gone through that, maybe you're wondering like, why do so many of us actually question whether lawyers with ADHD can be successful? The issue lies in the way the ADHD nervous system is wired. The ADHD brain only gets dopamine when at least one interest-based trigger is present. And these would be things that are considered interesting, novel, urgent, or challenging by ADHD brains. And of course, neurotypical people also respond to these triggers. And that can be sort of confusing because it's like, well, of course, I would rather work on something interesting, but if it's important, I can get it done. That's not true for people with ADHD. So here's what's going to make or break an ADHD lawyer's career: whether or not their work environment is optimized with those interest-based dopamine triggers in mind. So I've got two actionable ways of doing this. The first one, ADHD lawyers can do for themselves, and this is ditching conventional productivity rules, because these things are all designed around importance-based triggers, which our brain doesn't recognize as what we need to regulate attention. So they don't work. These are things like eat the frog. Nope, not if we do the task we dread most first, we will never be able to start it, and then we won't be able to start anything else for the rest of the day. We need to start with something that gets our dopamine flowing. So something that's interesting, urgent, challenging, novel, and then we can ride that wave of dopamine that we've created to tackle that very necessary but very uninteresting task that's in front of us. Another piece of standard advice that we hear is use a planner. Oh, this one's so challenging. We will use a planner until we forget to check it or update it or forget where we put it, or it's no longer fun and novel for us to use it anymore. What? We should use a digital one? Yeah. Okay, so opening up a computer or a phone to find an app or software is basically like opening Pandora's box for us. By the time I get my phone unlocked, I'm either forget why I'm on the phone, or I get distracted by something else that has popped up on the phone or a different app that I see. And listen, eventually we will find something that works, but it takes a lot of experimentation along the way to figure out if what we've found is something that's actually going to work for us, or if the novelty is going to wear off. Now, the second actionable item is reasonable accommodations in the workplace. And this is something that employers will need to help ADHD lawyers with. And yes, I'm using the term reasonable accommodations straight from the Americans with Disabilities Act, because ADHD is indeed a protected disability. Unless you think this is some kind of millennial snowflake crap, let us not forget how an entire generation of lawyers refused to learn how to use a word processor and instead required secretaries to transcribe their dictation, which is totally fine. That can actually be a reasonable accommodation to this day. However, that wasn't due to a disability, but rather a preference to not learning how to use a word processor. There are two straightforward ways to support an ADHD lawyer in the workplace. And those are executive assistants and skilled managers. And for ADHD lawyers, executive dysfunction is a very common problem. So having an executive assistant who can help them be accountable for deadlines, to fill out their timesheets, to turn their timesheets in on time, to get to meetings on time, to follow up on important projects or with different people, etc. So while I truly believe that every lawyer should have access to an executive assistant that can be assigned to them and know how they work and support them in their individual ways, ADHD lawyers cannot be truly successful without executive assistance. But the next piece that is super important for a workplace accommodation is skilled managers. This is especially important for ADHD lawyers whose executive dysfunction makes it difficult to prioritize tasks and then to initiate tasks before they become urgent. I've got a couple suggestions here, and I am not pulling them out of thin air. These are actually on a specific page of the EEOC, and they have guidance for accommodations on lawyers with disabilities. And I will link that below. So here's a fantastic one. When partners or managers of ADHD lawyers are giving assignments, they can help them tremendously by breaking those assignments up into smaller deadlines. While it may seem counterintuitive to give someone less time to do something, with a shorter time horizon, those tasks feel urgent to us, and that will trigger our nervous systems to get to work. There's also the added benefit of helping us to prioritize tasks because you're assigning to us the most important part of the process first. So honestly, if these accommodations were just provided to all lawyers as like best business practices, I don't think there would be any complaints. Because what it's going to result in is less frustration for you and for the ADHD lawyer themselves. So if you're an ADHD lawyer who has not found a work environment where they are willing to accommodate you in some of these relatively small ways, and instead are blaming you for your brain chemistry and saying that you're lazy or otherwise incompetent in some way, I can help. And neurotypical lawyers, same thing, I can help you too. My signature career coaching framework has been designed specifically for lawyers, and it will help you to figure out exactly what you want to do and help you to go find it. But this framework also includes being able to identify a workplace environment that's going to be accommodating for whatever your specific needs may be. I work with tons of ADHD lawyers and neurotypical lawyers alike. And if you join my program, Make Your Next Move, you will join a community of like-minded lawyers of all varieties, and they are all on their way to landing a job they genuinely like and in which they will be truly supported.